Over the past week, key players on the New Orleans Saints defense at every level have been recognized as top 10 at their position. How they and their role players have become one of the most feared defensive units in the NFL. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into this Friday episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering the New Orleans Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget that we're free and available on all podcast apps and on YouTube as well. And I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter. You can find me over on USA Today's Saints Wire, Tuesdays on Locked On NFL, and here with you every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. And on today's episode, earlier this week, Cam Jordan was recognized as a top 10 edge rusher, but now as the week has continued along, Marshon Lattimore has been noted as a top 10 cornerback, and Demario Davis noted as a top 10 linebacker. So we want to acknowledge those rankings and what they mean for this New Orleans Saints defense, which has become one of the most feared units in the NFL. So do they have everything that they need going into 2022 to be a top 10 defense yet again? And will they be one of those defenses that's most feared? We're going to break all of that down, as well as get to the player excitement around the 2022 NFL season. So let's start off here with Demario Davis. Demario Davis's ranking came out first earlier this week, number 6 for the New Orleans Saints and number 6 across the NFL as an off-ball linebacker. His highest ranking ever was ranking number 2. I love this ranking for Demario Davis. I think I could still see him in the top 5, the group of 5 above him, going from 5 to 1, Roquan Smith, Devin White, Fred Warner, Micah Parsons, as well as Darius Leonard. I have a little bit of trouble considering Micah Parsons an off-ball linebacker, so I actually don't think he should be on this list. I think he should be on the edge rusher list, personally, and that might potentially push Cam Jordan off of that list out of the top 10, but as this currently goes, I don't know if I would consider Micah Parsons a valuable linebacker in coverage, but maybe I have just a little bit of a misunderstanding. Maybe that's more Locked On Cowboys territory for them to break all of that down, Landon and Marcus. But so for me, Demario Davis is a top 5 linebacker in the NFL, particularly off-ball guys. One of the NFL personnel evaluators says he might start to decline this year, but he's so I'll just say dang. He's so dang smart that it almost doesn't matter. He does everything well. Another NFC scout said that he has always been an exceptional athlete and worker. I would also throw leader in there as well. And just the maturity that comes from being in this position for so long and being in multiple coverage schemes and the game evolving to more sub-base packages has allowed him to be a 3-down prototype. Now that is the part that I want to kind of focus in on a little bit before we move on to Marshon Lattimore here. Demario Davis's ability to evolve with the NFL game is on par with Drew Brees' ability to evolve at the quarterback position. That's a big claim, and I'm not afraid to make it, and I'll make it over and over again. Drew Brees did a fantastic job developing kind of his late career three-pointer, right? The way that LeBron James tried to do, I guess I'll say. And one of the things that sticks out most about Drew Brees was his longevity, of course, but his ability to shift, right? He knew that the arm strength was dwindling, that at that point in his career, that wasn't going to be what he was going to rest his laurels on. Even 2017-18, when he was still pushing the ball downfield, he started to go a little bit more of the death by paper cuts route in this Sean Payton system, or in that Sean Payton system. And that allowed him to still be effective because of his deadly accuracy and all of that. Demario Davis has done something similar. He's gone from being the downhill thumper to being the all-around player that you have to be in order to be a successful linebacker in today's NFL. You have to be able to cover. You have to be able to rush the passer. You have to be able to be, involved in the run game. You have to be able to communicate and set up, and you have to be able to operate in a thinner unit than what you're accustomed to. When Demario Davis started between the New York Jets and the Cleveland Browns, you saw more 3 linebacker sets than what you see now, where the New Orleans Saints hardly ever have 3 linebackers on the field, like barely over 10 times over the course of, in respectively in each of the last few seasons. So that's changed everything around the way that Demario Davis has, started to play the game and then has continued to play the game over time. And his ability to be able to evolve with the changing landscape of the NFL into a greater passing league, running backs being pass catchers out of the backfield, tight ends, being more utilized in the passing game than as run blockers or as pass blockers. He's evolved along with that every single step of the way. And his intelligence and his ability to be able to adapt and evolve is only part of what makes him so special. The other part is the way that he impacts the game. Over 100 tackles, over 10 tackles for a loss, and over 3 or more sacks in each of the last 4 seasons. The only other player that has done that multiple times in that span is Roquan Smith, who did it twice. Pretty incredible stuff from Demario Davis. Next up, I want to break down really quickly Marshon Lattimore being ranked the number 2 cornerback in the NFL, his second highest ranking ever, his highest ranking being ranking in at number 1. I believe that was actually after his rookie season. The number 1 corner ranking in here was Jalen Ramsey. And look, I'm not mad at this ranking at all. There's a couple of different reasons. Jalen Ramsey may not have had the most consistent performance last season, but there is no other corner in the NFL that you game plan your offense against more than Jalen Ramsey, right? Like, he's the guy that you throw away from. He's, along with Marshon Lattimore, he's the guy that you game plan for and game plan against, knowing that he's on the field. He changes the way that offenses play football when they play against the Los Angeles Rams defense. Aaron Donald certainly helps with that, of course, as well. But you look at, his big plays against Cincinnati in the Super Bowl. You look at the scale that he's played on in terms of being a playoff team last year, playing in Los Angeles, playing in the Super Bowl. Of course, that's going to elevate you in terms of being, recency bias, or going to elevate you in terms of how you come to these players, executives, and coaches who did all the voting on this poll. That's going to elevate the way that they think about you, obviously, of course. But even still, even with a pretty inconsistent or a little bit of a less consistent performance last season, Jalen Ramsey is absolutely number 1 on this list. But I think Marshon Lattimore is starting to show you that he can get back to number 1 on this list. And one of the things that, just like when we talked about, or actually just like we've been talking about with these New Orleans Saints defenders all week, what's the theme here? Their all-around ability to impact the game in multiple spaces. Marshon Lattimore is a very good run defender. He's a very good tackler. He's not a Deion Sanders. Don't let Deion know I said that. I know he'll come for me. I know he will. Marshon is somebody that gets involved in the run game, that gets involved, obviously, in the pass game. He had 19 pass deflections last year, not just pass breakups to where, you made contact with a receiver as the receiver got their hands on the ball and forced the receiver to drop that pass. No. He knocked away 19 different passes in 2021. That is not easy. He had the highest forced incompletion percentage amongst qualifying cornerbacks as well. He had a career high in tackles, and then he also got his 3rd straight Pro Bowl nod in his 5th year. Finishing up his 5th year. And he got a brand new contract right in the middle of all of it too. So, and of course he did all of that while he also had a club on his hand, right? He had the cast on his hand after week 1, particularly following week 1. And all that. One of the people, one of the NFC defensive coaches that commented on him said that he got back closer to what he looked like in his first couple of years in the league. He hit a turning point in a season where he really was at his best and showed physical and competitive strong. So you see all of the praise that comes for him. And there's some acknowledgement about his inconsistency in terms of playing up to greater competition, playing down to lesser competition. And there's not a lot of room for him to do that this year because he is playing against massive competition all season. Just to name a few, of course, he gets Devontae Adams again, just like he opened up the season last year. He'll get him when the Raiders come to New Orleans. He'll match up with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. He'll match up with Justin Jefferson, who mentioned him right after Jalen Ramsey as the most talented, the toughest opponent that he's played in the NFL, a guy in Justin Jefferson who averages throughout his career 6 catches and 91 receiving yards per game, when Marshon Lattimore, in his matchup in terms of targets where Marshon Lattimore was his defender, he held him to 4 receptions for 55 yards with 2 pass deflections in that game against the last time that those two met, the big 52 point game for the New Orleans Saints. Huge game for a guy named Alvin Kamara. Maybe you heard about it, just a few touchdowns in that one. And they'll match up again this coming season, October 2nd, right? Going into London. So we'll see that matchup. So there's not really a lot of room here for Marshon Lattimore to potentially, quote unquote, play down to lesser competition, because there's not a lot of lesser competition that he'll face at wide receiver. And there's not a lot of lesser competition when you talk about the New Orleans Saints as a whole, and particularly their defense and what they bring on a weekly basis. They're one of the most feared units in the NFL. Let's talk about how they compiled that unit and why they can be that unit again in 2022. Don't you just love those little moments when you do future you a favor, maybe the night before you do the dishes so that you wake up in the morning and they're all done? Those types of moments where you do something nice for yourself that ends up benefiting you in the long run. Well, maybe if you could, you'd probably help yourself out with a little bit of cash as well. How's that sound? Well, now, if it sounds good, you can with Dave, because Dave is a banking app that's going to let you get up to $500 instantly with extra cash. That's more money to fill your tank. Maybe you're looking for a gift for somebody, or maybe you're just trying to catch up on bills. Hey, it happens to all of us. Dave is the place for you to check out. There's no interest, no credit check is necessary. You just basically walk in, walk out, $500. Nice and simple, right? They make it nice and easy for you. Millions of people have actually already downloaded the Dave app so that they can get the financial relief that they need, and now you can as well with extra cash. Just download the Dave app at your app store right now. That's DAVE. Sign up for an extra cash account and get up to $500 instantly. For terms and conditions, go to dave.com/legal. Read up. Instant transfer fees apply. Banking is provided by Evolve. Member FDIC. Future you, I'm going to say thank you. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Thanks again, as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Appreciate you, as always, for the support, for being here to help out with the show. I'm going to point out my my little guys here over on YouTube, jlwoodwork.com, getting those done. They are gorgeous, like hanging these things up. That was a lot of fun. So super excited about that. I'll throw the link in the description. If you're listening on a podcast side, go check it out on YouTube. It's a beautiful couple little like wooden signs, a Locked On Saints podcast sign, which is super dope, custom made, and then a NOLA sign. I'm super excited about it. So if you want to check those out, jlwoodwork.com. I'll put the link in the description so that you can check those out. You can't buy the Locked On Saints one, no. Can't buy it. It's not on sale. That's me. That's exclusive. That's exclusive. All right, so as we continue on with today's episode, I want to break down now how the New Orleans Saints got to this point when it came to the defense. I'm going to ask you to do something you're going to hate me for, all right? I'm going to ask you to remember just for a second 2014, 15, and 16. I know it hurts. Think about those corners. Think about those linebackers. Think about the defensive line and just sort of like what that unit was. Think about the defensive coordinator. It's particularly 2014, how all that worked out. It wasn't great. Those are some historically bad defenses for the New Orleans Saints. So how did they go from that to now walking into 2022 with a unit that has the opportunity to be a top 5 scoring defense for the 3rd season in a row? How did they get here? And a big part of it is always going to be contributed to the 2017 draft class, and rightfully so. But it does go beyond that. You think about this right now, going into 2022, there's still high hopes for this New Orleans Saints defense, and rightfully so. Just like we mentioned, right now there's one player at all 3 levels of the New Orleans Saints defense that's being voted on by their peers, i.e. other players, by coaches, by executives, as being top 10 players. There's top tier talent at wide receiver like Justin Jefferson, talking about New Orleans Saints cornerback Marshon Lattimore as one of the toughest competitors he's played against in the NFL. And that's just to start. It's very likely that once the safety list comes out over at ESPN+, that Tyrann Mathieu will be on that list as well as a top 10 safety. So then you've got 4 major position groups out of 5 on the defense covered in terms of having top 10 talent at all of those spots. The only exception being on the defensive interior. And some of that has to do with David Onyemata being suspended for the first 6 games, because if you look at his production in 2022 or 2021, it wasn't that bad once he got rolling. If only it could have happened a little bit earlier in the season and you would have been able to benefit from it for, a longer portion of the year. Then maybe he could have ended up on the defensive interior list as well. And maybe he ends up on the defensive interior list next year, being that he's expected to be on the field week 1 through 18 with the bye week, of course, in the middle there. So it's not just a 2017 draft class though, right? Marshon Lattimore, Marcus Williams, Trey Hendrickson, Al-Quadin Muhammad, they all contributed, even Al-Quadin Muhammad, they all contributed in some way or another from 2017 till now. But it has been Dennis Allen and his ability to put together the defensive talent and personnel that he needs. Years ago, Delvin Breaux was on the show. That really, wow, I've been putting together some bars on a show over the next couple of days. Y'all better respect this lyricism going on. Delvin Breaux came on the show years ago and talked about Eli Apple, right? I asked him, what does Eli Apple bring to the New Orleans Saints? This is when Eli Apple was still performing well in the black and gold. And he mentioned that he gives Dennis Allen the type of corner that allows him to coach the system and play the game the way that he wants to, that maybe Ken Crawley couldn't hold up to throughout that time. Ken Crawley started off strong, but then it didn't really remain. So then when they made that trade and Eli Apple played really well that back half of his first season in New Orleans, that was Delvin Breaux' sort of perception of that, was that the personnel was coming together. Then you went from Eli Apple to Janoris Jenkins, who absolutely gave you that player that's going to be able to allow you to play out on an island. You look at, I believe it was 17 of, or maybe 15. I think it was 15 of Marshon Lattimore's 19 pass deflections last season came in man coverage. That's what Dennis Allen wants to do. He wants to put his corners one-on-one and say, I am better than you, to the wide receiver across that lines up across from him. Chris Richard, all of these guys have been a big part of that development as well. Aaron Glenn before that, before he moved on to be defensive coordinator over in Detroit. So yeah, you can start with that 2017 draft class, but Dennis Allen's willingness to continuously fiddle with the defense, claiming, pushing the team. I'm sure he was a driving force in claiming Janoris Jenkins when he was released from the New York Giants, to the point to where Janoris Jenkins actually sat on the bench for a second before he actually got involved with New Orleans. Then he got on the field and got an interception late in that Carolina Panthers game that he effectively made his debut in, and then became the starting cornerback opposite Marshon Lattimore. Don't forget that when they signed Janoris Jenkins at first, he was on the bench. He was on the bench, and then they ended up moving him to starter because that's where he should have been, right? But they were able to do that because they never settled. Even though they had the starters there, they drove competition, and they're doing it again this year. They're doing it again in 2022. And it's the reason why this team that has been so fearsome in terms of a top 5 scoring defense over the course of the past 2 seasons has the ability to do it yet again going into 2022, right? They lost Marcus Williams. They lost Malcolm Jenkins as he retired, but they replaced those guys with formidable guys that can easily replace them. Guys like Marcus May, as well as Tyrann Mathieu. There was that ridiculous roster ranking that came out a couple of days ago that had the Saints at like 21st behind like the New York Jets and the Minnesota Vikings and a couple of other teams that they should not be behind when it comes to roster rankings going into 2022. And the question that was asked at the end of the blurb in that piece was, do Marcus May and Tyrann Mathieu have enough left in the tank? As if we're not talking about a guy that's replacing a guy 4 years older than him and Malcolm Jenkins for Tyrann Mathieu, as if Marcus May isn't just 29 years old, right? So let's not get it twisted here. The New Orleans Saints have driven competition. They have adequately replaced talent, and they've continued to do this not just here in 2022, but they did it with Dennis Allen as a driving defensive force over the course of the past few seasons. When they lost Sheldon Rankins, they didn't see a fall off in the defensive interior. The pressures weren't necessarily there. You had the suspension for David Onyemata, all of that, but the run game was still right at the very top, and the run defense was still right at the very top. They still surpassed 40 sacks before 16 games. They still did all the things that they did with Sheldon Rankins. When they lost, when they lost Eli Apple, when they lost Ken Crawley, when they lost Janoris Jenkins, they replaced, they produced all in those same areas. And so now you're looking at them doing that again. When they lost, when they sort of had that shuffle up in the defensive, in the slot, right? They drafted CJ Gardner-Johnson in the 4th freaking round, which is still insane to me, and plugged him in. And now he's one of the best slot corners, if not the best slot corner in the NFL. When they lost Von Bell, they brought back Malcolm Jenkins. They have continuously done this, and they will do it again here in 2022. You can expect that Quan Alexander is effectively lost at this point. We'll see if he comes back. Even if he does, I doubt he starts over Pete Werner. They have their replacement there. If you have the competition that's going on between Paulson Adebo and Alontae Taylor, who they drafted in the 2nd round this year. Bradley Roby could potentially push there. Another guy that they signed or that they traded for that is a veteran starter quality corner that regulated to the bench because of how much they drive competition and try to build this roster and never settle. That's how the New Orleans Saints became one of the most feared units defensive units in the NFL is by not settling. And they're not settling yet again going into 2022. And I think that means for a third straight year, this easily has the opportunity to be a top 5 scoring defense, a top 5 defense as a whole, and one of the most feared units in the NFL yet again. All right, y'all, coming up next, we're wrapping up the show with a quick look at the New Orleans Saints players and their excitement for the 2022 NFL season. Excitement has been our theme throughout the week, so we're closing it out with the New Orleans Saints players. And if nothing else shows you their excitement more than anything, it's how much work they're putting in this offseason. We'll highlight all of that as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints. I want to remind you about our friends over at BetOnline real quick. First, BetOnline, the #1 source for all of your sports betting needs. You want to bet on the Saints win totals. You want to bet on their division finish. You want to bet on their Super Bowl odds, comeback player of the year odds. There are 2 New Orleans Saints at the top of that list in the top 3 with Jameis Winston and Michael Thomas. Both of those guys could also fall into offensive player of the year odds. You've got Chris Olave with offensive rookie of the year odds. You can even do over-unders on how many receptions and receiving yards he has going into his rookie season. There's so much for you to check out just on the New Orleans Saints front. There's also the rest of the NFL, the NBA, the MLB, the NHL, and so much more that you can get in on over at BetOnline, our official gambling partners here on the Locked On Podcast Network. So go and check them out on your mobile device or wherever you are able to access the website. You're going to get everything that you need at BetOnline, where the game starts. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints. Just to talk a little bit and break down the New Orleans Saints players' excitement around this 2022 NFL season. And you can see it because these players are putting in all of the work that they need to be putting in over the course of this season. Just start with the guys that are coming back from injury. Wil Lutz, Jameis Winston, 2 of the most important players returning for this New Orleans Saints team. They've been working out together on their rehab, on getting back on the field, coming back from their injuries, getting ready for training camp, which is just a few weeks away. Michael Thomas on his way back from his injury as well, expected to be available for the Saints in 2022, hopefully back at some point during training camp. Again, don't be worried if Michael Thomas is not out on the field at the beginning of training camp. Very likely a slow ramp-up period for him going into that, but he and Chris Olave continuing to put in work. And we've seen that over and over and over again. If you have to ask any questions about Michael Thomas anymore, you're simply not paying attention. And that's not for Saints fans. That's for the people that that come in from the national perspective and say, oh, well, what's going to happen with Michael Thomas? Like, we still don't know, blah, blah. Yes, you do, because he's been telling you all offseason. So has Dennis Allen, so has Cody Burns, so have the New Orleans Saints, right? Michael Thomas is expected to be back and available at some point during training camp, expected to be back and available in the 2022 season. If you're questioning his buy-in, you're willingly not paying attention at this point. Dennis Allen going out to California to go and visit him. Cody Burns, new wide receiver coach for the New Orleans Saints, going out to California to visit him. Him hitting up Chris Olave after he was drafted. I mean, the night that he was drafted, on draft night. I don't know how many different ways I have to say it in order to make it clear. Chris Olave was drafted. Michael Thomas reached out to him. It was that quick. And brought him out to California with him for like 10 days, and they worked out together, and they've continuously worked out together. Michael Thomas was back at the facility during OTAs, mandatory minicamp, all of that. Michael Thomas has been present. So there's no more questioning around his, dedication to the team or his motivation to get back. Like, he's clearly excited to get back out on the football field because he's a competitor, and he always has been, right? So you look at what is becoming like the comeback player of the year city, the city of New Orleans, Jameis Winston and Michael Thomas in the NFL, Zion Williamson in the NBA. These guys, they're so excited to get back out on the field. And you can hear it. Like when we've talked to Jameis during mandatory minis and OTAs and offseason pressers and things like that, like the old Zoom pressers that we were doing and stuff, you can feel the excitement from Jameis Winston and how happy he is to be back with the New Orleans Saints, how happy he is to get back out on the field. Him having that brace off in all these workout videos is a huge step forward that shows you the progress of his recovery. Wil Lutz and him working out together, getting in all that work, and Wil Lutz getting ready for the season as well, who could have taken the Saints from a 9-8 season last year to an 11-6 season last year, single-footedly, I guess I would say, right? Just by having a sufficient kicker on the field. Like a good Wil Lutz would have helped the New Orleans Saints big time. Not even the great Wil Lutz that we know that can be available for this team. You can see the excitement. CJ Gardner-Johnson talking about how excited he is to be, with this team. I know he's looking for a new contract and everything, and hopefully he gets it. But speaking of getting new contracts, Demario Davis got hooked up with an additional year last week or the week before last, going into the weekend for 2024. He's excited, right? Marshon Lattimore being acknowledged as the number 2 cornerback in the NFL by his peers, coaches, and executives around the league. He's excited going into this. Alontae Taylor hasn't signed his rookie contract yet, but he has still been around and still putting in all of the work. He's clearly excited. There is so much excitement around this New Orleans Saints team. And I don't just mean the fan perspective, the analyst perspective, the expert perspective, the organizational perspective, all of that. The players are excited for this 2022 NFL season. Cam Jordan, speaking with NFL Films on Sirius XM, talking about how this New Orleans Saints defense learned that they could not only impact games, but win games. And that kind of confidence is something that he absolutely would never take for granted. There's excitement there around all of that. So this New Orleans Saints team is just as excited to hit the field as you are to watch them come September 11th, week 1 in Atlanta up against the rival Falcons. So I don't know how much more excitement, we have left to break down here. I think we've hit it on every angle, but wow, is there so much excitement around this New Orleans Saints team for a team that is going into a brand new head coach, going into a brand new quarterback effectively, right? Because Jameis Winston over the course of the first 7 games was kind of held back a little bit in 2022. Is he going to be a completely different quarterback in 2021? Is he going to be a completely different quarterback in 2022 that's let loose a little bit more, right? But then that is also looking to make those right decisions as opposed to trying to make the big plays and all of that. So in essence, right, the quarterback to coach camaraderie, that combination is brand new in New Orleans for the first time since 2006. And instead of people being concerned, they're excited. And that tells you something about this New Orleans Saints team, this New Orleans Saints fan base, this New Orleans sports fan base, because it's not just the Saints anymore. The Pelicans have arrived. Have arrived. It's a basketball city, Mr. Perkins. Here we are, right? So there's a ton to be excited about. And I'm grateful we have time here and get to break it down every Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. Coming up next week, let's get ready for training camp. It's almost that time. We're going to speak with a couple of different folks. I'm working on getting a player interview. I'm working on getting an agent interview to kind of talk a little bit more about what it's like to be an NFL agent. At what point are you waiting for you hope that hey, don't draft this guy because we want him to go undrafted so he can pick where he goes, all these other things. So we'll get a little bit of insight on all of that. And then we'll have a couple of other familiar faces come through as well. So it'll be a fun week here at Locked On Saints. The big kind of question mark for next week is just going to be who are the players to watch. And I really, really, really want to dig in on some of the players that you know and love and some of the players that you need to know going into training camp. So we'll cover all of that going into next week. I appreciate you as always making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you go and check out Locked On NFL, everything you need to know around the league in less than 20 minutes. Give some love to Locked On LSU with Caroline Fenton, Locked On Pelicans with Jake Madison as well. Show your Louisiana sports a ton of love here on the Locked On Podcast Network because we got you covered from one part of the state to the other. So we got you. I appreciate you as always for making me a part of your day. I will see you on Monday. If you see me, say hi. And as always, for everything else you need in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you living. Let me know how your mom and them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.